And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Podcast. I am here, as per usual, with my co-host Carlos. How are you, Carlos, on this Tuesday evening?
I am here. I'm thriving. I am happy to talk about Rowdies on this lovely Tuesday night. I was talking to my parents this past weekend, and they always give me constructive criticism, let's say. They're like, you know what? We were listening to the episode from this past week, and I was like, oh, yeah, like, how'd it go? And they're like, it was good. But we can't hear you when your voice starts to go down. You can start losing some of your energy halfway through your sentences. So I'm going to make it a point to enunciate all of my words and kind of keep the same volume this episode.
All right.
We're going to get better, just as the Rowdies are getting better this offseason.
There we go.
Come into a great form into the actual season. And we're going to be in full swing soon enough. James, how are you doing? I know you're feeling a little bit sick. How's that going over there?
Yeah, other than that, I'm doing okay. Carlos, you have been on this podcast sick before, so I guess one of us has to be, at least until the season starts, right? Cross our fingers until the season starts, then everybody will be healthy. Eureka, our producer, and you and me as the co-host, we will all be healthy so that we can watch and attend and enjoy as many Rowdies games as possible.
Yeah. And I'm so excited. It's I keep saying this, it's crunch time. It really is. We're really kind of coming up into that period where we can start talking real stuff. We've been in that for the last couple of weeks, and we have a lot to talk about today still. I mean, there's a preseason game this past weekend that was quote unquote closed doors. If you actually just pulled up, they kind of just let you in, but I didn't tell you that. Yeah, I mean, we have preseason stuff to talk about. We have what else happened? I mean, we've talked about the Western Conference teams too, James. We haven't talked about them at all. We'll briefly hit on a few of them on this episode. So a lot to talk about in a short amount of time, James. So why don't we just jump into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get started. As you said, we have not done our Western Conference preview, so we have to cover the Western Conference this week and next week before we do our actual preview for the first game. Folks, it is that close. Somehow we have gotten through all of this time, and we are that close to being back to Rowdies soccer. Beforehand, we need to cover a little bit of other soccer. Congrats again this week to Madison Cox for scoring in Puerto Rico's first Gold Cup win. They went down 1-0, and they came back with her goal, I should mention, her goal against Panama in the 73rd minute. And then in the 90th +3, they scored the winner. So Puerto Rico gets their first 3 points ever at a major tournament. It's
against
awesome.
A good Panama team, by the way. I mean, it's not just
Panama
a random team. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy stuff. It was so cool to see her get on the score sheet. And not to encroach on the Tampa Bay Sun podcast, but the Tampa Bay Sun also replied with a little eyeballs emoji, You see that on Twitter. So nothing, I don't know. I mean, take that with a grain of salt, make of that what you will. But I'm just going to say it'd be sick to have her on our first professional women's soccer team in Tampa. I'll just throw that out there. If anybody from the Sun is listening, go get her, man. Come on. I mean, she's doing well at the Gold Cup, helping to make history for this Puerto Rican team. That'd be so cool to have her stick around here in Tampa.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that obviously she's a local and a native, so that's pretty cool. I don't know what they're doing in terms of signings. I was listening to, some stuff about the USL on the women's side recently, and it seems like the Tampa Bay Sun are the farthest along in terms of all the teams that have been named, but still no signings. So we have to keep our eyes peeled for that. And hopefully we will have some more news coming out about the Sun relatively soon. Anyway, like I said, congratulations to Puerto Rico. Congratulations to Madison, an interviewee on this podcast. We're not going to say it's down to the RBLR bump because she was obviously good enough to do that without us, but we're going to say that she gave us the Puerto Rico bump here at RBLR Sports. Sure. And thank you for doing that. So now we do have to cover the USL. Unfortunately, we do not have any Rowdies news yet this week. I don't know if there will be other stuff out later. If so, unfortunately, we will have to cover it next week. But yeah,
it always happens.
Yeah, it does. It does very frequently when we go on a Monday or a Tuesday. But either way, there is still news around the USL that we need to talk about. And we're going to get to that here in a little bit. But beforehand, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe on any major podcast platform. And of course, please follow us on social media like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere that you are. We are at RBLR Sports, and we will see you there too. Now, Carlos, I will take the first bit of USL news because I just saw this one. I don't know how much you had seen of it, but then we can go through the other ones here together. So Orange County have announced a couple of different new owners over the course of this offseason. I believe one of them was called Joey Bananas, something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
The Survivor guy. Yeah.
yeah. So this one, I guess, their new owner, another new owner. He has a more conventional name. Let's say his name is Eli Lesser. He is at Eli Lesser TV on Instagram, and yeah, he has become a new owner, I guess, ahead of this, this season for Orange County. I will just read this out to you because this is not a name that I know, but that doesn't mean that I know everyone who it is. I didn't know who Joey Bananas was when we talked about that one, but Eli Lesser is an LA-based soccer host and content creator covering U.S. soccer news and culture, gaining 69.2K followers on Instagram. So he has some type of following, obviously. And yeah, he must have enough money to become part of the ownership group at Orange County. So that's exciting for them. I don't know too much about him. I guess somehow even my soccer news has been biased towards the Eastern Coast. I listened to Total Soccer Show, and they are based out of Richmond, Virginia, which is obviously on the East Coast. So, maybe I am somehow this biased that I've missed good LA content. But yeah, this is one of the new ownership group members for Orange County, and we'll see how all this plays out because they have a lot of chefs in that kitchen, I guess.
Yeah. I'm actually I don't know who this guy is, to be honest, either, but I've always been kind of a fan of influencers, let's say, getting involved in stuff like this, especially like USL, a league that's like growing rapidly, but still needs like a kick every once in a while to kind of get it to broader audiences that otherwise might not see it. Orange County has like decent enough support, but they're kind of flanked by these bigger MLS brands in LA Galaxy, LAFC, and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. It's good. It's just good to have some more kind of like eyes get on a team like this that otherwise might not get those eyes. I don't know. I'm sure this will be a positive thing for Orange County.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you said it actually. If they have, all of this traffic going to their site, whether that's Eli Lesser covering soccer or Joey Bananas in whichever contest it was that he was the 19-time champion of or whatever, then that's good. That will bring more people into the soccer sphere who might not have been, and more people who are in the soccer sphere down to the USL sphere as well. So obviously, as you said, Carlos, we do enjoy that. Now,
Exactly.
I will turn it over to you for the next piece of news here around the USL.
Yeah, going around the USL, we're staying out west with El Paso, fun team in the Locomotive, who've picked up Brandon Craig and Javier Navarez. They're joining El Paso on loan. Again, news. It's not like we're not expecting huge games at this point late in the offseason, but signings are being made, moves are happening. I don't know too much about these players, but moves are happening for El Paso, a squad that kind of has had a relatively quiet offseason, to my
Yeah.
knowledge. Hasn't really made particularly, big splash signings or anything. One I'll highlight so far is Jamali Waite, because I think that was kind of crazy for Pittsburgh to let go of one of the best goalies in the league, and he ended up in El
Agreed.
Paso. But yeah, so these guys are joining Jamali and the rest of their offseason signings, Brandon Craig and Javier Navarez, on loan at El Paso. James, you know anything else about them that you want to add? Maybe add a bit of context in here, so I'm not just saying random names that don't mean anything to people.
Well, I will say for Brandon Craig, he is a highly rated U.S. Youth National Team player. He is coming on loan from the Philadelphia Union. He has been, a very highly rated player within the Philadelphia Union youth setup. And unfortunately, it has just been very difficult for him to break into the Philadelphia Union lineup. They're obviously a very good team in MLS, so that does make a little bit of sense, obviously. Here, last season, he went on loans to Austin FC, also within MLS. He didn't get a ton of playing time there, so I guess they decided that dropping him down a level will probably provide him with the adequate amount of playing time to move his career forward, and I'm hoping for that too, because he does look like a very good player at the back. He's very, good on the ball. I think that everybody talks about whether or not he has the athletics to keep up in terms of the highest levels of the game. He certainly has the skill on the ball and the ability to pick a pass, but as a defender, you also need to, be able to chase people down if you get beat, what have you. Maybe somebody else gets beat too. So that is the question around him. And the other player, Javier Navarez. He is on loan from Liga MX, specifically CD Juarez in that league. So top division in Mexico, you can't, it's not like it's going to be a bad player, but I will say I don't know a ton about him. He is 23 years old and he's not been the most regular player for Juarez. It makes sense for him, going on loan, obviously. But I think that these are two solid pickups as defenders, and they should bolster what actually looks like a relatively decent back line. They have Tony Alfaro, who is a Mexican American player. He was bouncing around MLS for several years, and now he's dropped down from the LA Galaxy to El Paso. So you think, Tony Alfaro and Brandon Craig at the back, maybe Javier Navarez in front of them, and Bolu Akinyote, a player from the Miami previously. It's actually not that bad of a lineup that they have, at least in terms of a spine. So, we'll see how it goes and fills out around them. But I think that is something to highlight there because they look like pretty good players.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I don't know a ton about them, but Javier Navarez, again, sounds like an interesting prospect. Again, pretty young guy, like you said, 23 years old on loan from Juarez, which is by no means a small or, insignificant club in Mexico. It's in the first division, and they, compete pretty regularly, kind of middle of the table club sometimes. So, good for them. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't kept up too much with El Paso's offseason, but these seem like moves that could certainly push them forward because they're a team that's kind of been on the edge. Let's say it's kind of breaking through. Maybe like the Birmingham of Western Conference, kind of just like close, but hasn't really found a way to break through. So maybe these guys will help them do that. We'll have to keep an eye on them. A couple wild cards out there for El Paso. Jumping on to the next one, James, I think we can move on to cover. I want to take this next bullet point because one of these guys is literally my boy. I had a class with him here.
I figured you might want to talk about this one.
Love this guy. Fantastic guy. But I'll mention this other guy first. FC Tulsa brought in a couple guys within the past week. One of them is a former Chelsea youth player in Harvey St. Clair. This is an interesting one. He's a winger. He is 6 foot. He's got some speed to him. He's only 25, so he's still pretty young, obviously, and can kind of break into his athletic prime in the next couple of years. Moved out to Tulsa from Venezia, from Venice officially. He's been on loan to like 4 different clubs in the past, let's say, 5 seasons. Scotland, Italy, played 2 games for Kilmarnock. Played in some lower division teams in Italy. Found his way over to Tulsa, interestingly. I can't imagine that's a fantastic transition from Italy to Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I'm sure he'll do fine out there. He seems like a talented player who has a lot to give, but just hasn't really seemed to break through. Spent his youth career at Chelsea, obviously a pretty big club with a great academy system. And just hasn't really broken through any of the clubs he was out on loan at and never really found a spot with the team he was officially signed for in Venezia. So hopefully he kind of gets something going over here with Tulsa. Seems like a really talented guy, big guy, 6 foot as a winger. It's kind of interesting. And he's got some speed to him. So keep an eye on him. He could be pretty good for Tulsa. Like kind of a wild card as well because we don't know too much about him. There's not like consistent stats for him. He's just kind of been all over the place the last few years. Keep an eye on him. He sounds like an interesting prospect for sure. The other guy is one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Like just a great person and a fantastic striker. And I'm so glad he's in the USL. His name is Stefan Stojanovic. Played 2 seasons at Georgetown. Had a fantastic game-winning goal in the Big East Conference Final against Providence that I was blessed to be at. One of the greatest sports memories of my life at Georgetown. It was so cool. He just had like this half volley to win it in overtime. Ran over, dapped me up. He's just a great guy. He's a big guy. He's got some speed to him. He's just a great technical finisher. And I'm really surprised he didn't find his way into Philadelphia Union's senior squad eventually. Because he's been with their 2 team in MLS Next Pro for the last couple seasons. Always seemed like he had more to give than that, to be honest. So I'm glad he kind of made it out of a reserve squad and made it over to a team like Tulsa.
Yeah,
he's got a lot to give for sure. So I'm really happy for him. I'm really curious to see what he can do over there with Tulsa. Just hope he doesn't score against us. Obviously, it always seems like like Georgetown players have a knack for performing really well when I'm rooting for them and they're playing against
They
the Rowdies.
they know that
Um,
you're covering it, obviously, so
yeah,
they
yeah,
gotta they
yeah,
gotta look good.
yeah. So I'm trying to pull up his exact stats in the past couple of years. So I was looking for that. Yeah, 11 goals and 43 appearances for Philadelphia Union, too. And now he's coming over to FC Tulsa again. Played 2 seasons over there for their 2 squad. And again, I'm really, really surprised he didn't manage to break through into that senior team. Fantastic, fantastic striker. Keep an eye on him. He's 6 foot, can move as if he was like, I don't know. He moves like he's smaller than he is, but he's an imposing character too. Like he can get up there. I just know this from seeing him play um, over at Shaw Field here at Georgetown. So fantastic guy, fantastic player. I'm happy for him. I'm happy this journey's taken him to the USL. Yeah, he's going to be really, really great for them and in Tulsa. So keep an eye on him. Again, Stefan, if for whatever reason you're listening to this, just don't score against us. Like I told you this in your Instagram comments when you put this on your Instagram the other day. I was like, please just go off, win the Golden Boot, but not against us. James, do you want to take this last piece of transfer news, or is there anything you want to add on these guys? Because there's a couple interesting signings for Tulsa. I mean, again, Stefan's one of my boys, so I'll always root for him. But this Harvey St. Clair character looks like an interesting player for sure.
Yeah, I would say just like you did, unfortunately, we just don't have a ton of tape on this guy. People who have access to Y Scout, which you would assume FC Tulsa does, will probably have plenty of tape. But yeah, it's interesting that they went and found him. It's another one of those very random moves. Like last week or the week before, we were discussing that goalkeeper that Hartford signed, and we were like, how the hell did he even know that how the hell did they know about him? And it's just crazy. But it'll be interesting to see how he does. I know he's a former Scottish youth international. That doesn't mean too much, I guess, at this point in his career, but it's just, it's just weird. So it's a little interesting. And I like you've said it. I always wonder how these guys get in touch with each other, that they end up playing. I mean, no offense to Tulsa, but as you said, Carlos, leaving Italy and you go to Oklahoma, there aren't a lot of people who make that choice. Like, let's not say willingly, because obviously he chose to do it, but there aren't a lot of people who would choose to do it if they could stay in Italy. Let's leave it that way.
Yeah, it's not exactly a. I don't know. I'm sure nobody's like, dying to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma one day.
It's not a worldwide destination or vacation destination.
Yeah, I was like it's one of those places. I was like, this is super random, but I was watching the Georgetown women's team. They had a great game, and I was like, book it. We're going to the Final Four. Someone look up, where's the Final Four for the women's tournament? And they said Cleveland, Ohio. And I said, never mind. You guys can go without me. No way you're gonna find me dead in Cleveland. It feels like a Tulsa situation for sure. But yeah, good for Tulsa. These are 2 big signings for them. And again, I'm super happy for my boy Stefan Zojanovic. He's a fantastic player, and I really can't overstate how much of a good guy he was too, just to be around. One of those really down to earth people, and a team that certainly had all the reason in the world to walk around with their chest out and their heads kind of high. They really, really humble group of guys, and he was certainly a big leader for that squad. So happy for him.
Cool. That's awesome to hear. And as you said, he can win the Golden Boot, but as long as he scores an own goal when he's playing the Rowdies, then
Exactly.
we'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last bit of transfer news before I hand it back to Carlos is Las Vegas Lights have quickly become one of the weirdest teams of the offseason. That's almost always the case. But stop me
At
if
least
you've
it's like
heard
positive now, though. At least it's like a little bit positive. Yeah.
I was going to say, so they've got the new ownership, they've got the new coach, they've got the new sporting director. All of these positions are filled. What are they going to do in terms of players? Because it's getting up to the very end of the season. Well, they've gone out and they've signed some really good ones. I'm going to highlight one specifically, but I do want to highlight some other names before I even get to that guy. So if you are a fan of, or know, like very bit part U.S. men's national team players, you'll know the name Joe Zhao. His dad actually also played for the U.S. national team. Anyway, he bounced around in Germany and other places. I believe he played for Cincinnati for a little bit when they were in MLS or on the way to MLS. I don't quite remember, but regardless, he is now with Cincinnati. So yeah, his 3 U.S. men's national team caps are a part of Las Vegas Lights, and that's very interesting. Fabian Garcia is another player who was signed with Las Vegas. If you remember that name, he was with San Antonio for their last 2 very successful seasons. Obviously, a player to keep an eye on. They signed Solomon Asante, a very famous name in the USL Championship, who was with Indy 11 last
That's a
year.
crazy one.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he wasn't the, he wasn't the best player with Indy, I would say, but this is still obviously a fantastic player.
He's
If
still
he
got it in
reaches
him. Yeah.
Yeah, if he reaches anywhere near the level that he was at with Phoenix Rising, then Las Vegas obviously have a very good player on their hands. And another player that I wanted to highlight is Emra Clementa. Now, I don't know how many people will remember this name, but he was with Sacramento Republic from 2014 to 2017, did so well that he moved to MLS. MLS did not really work out for him, so he dropped back down to USL, and he bounced around a couple of different teams. He was with Oakland Roots for the past 3 seasons, making 81 appearances. So these are good names. These are very good players, and it's interesting that all of these guys have found their way to Las Vegas now with all of the changes there. The one player that I actually wanted to highlight and spend a little bit of time on was this guy Edison Ascona. He is from the Dominican Republic, but he grew up in Miami. He was playing for the Inter Miami youth team, so he was ultimately signed to a homegrown deal. Means he, played with Messi and Busquets and everybody who was with them last year. He was not the most frequent player for Inter Miami in MLS, so they sent him on loan to El Paso, something we've seen a little bit of tonight. And I guess they did not necessarily think that he was in their future. Honestly, it seems like it's kind of hard to break into that team if you are not straight from South America right now, because they have signed all of the best players from Paraguay, from Argentina, mostly Argentina, I guess, but all of these great young South American prospects. So it would be pretty difficult for someone who just came up through the youth team to make it. And he has joined Las Vegas with an option to make the deal permanent in July. So I like this kid as a player. I like him because he's a good player for the Dominican Republic, and I like seeing the Dominican Republic do well because I feel like they have a lot of potential. That's a me thing, not necessarily a Rowdies fandom thing, but at the same time, it is an interesting player to highlight, and I really think that he's indicative of what Las Vegas are going for now, which is just an entirely different setup. And I appreciate that they're giving Edison Ascona hopefully a very good platform to succeed.
And I appreciate that they're not dragging the league down anymore.
Yes, that's true too.
They are existing. Speaking of dragging the league down, I got an email from Loudoun United earlier today.
Good segue.
I went to a couple of their games, quote unquote, when they were playing the Rowdies. For whatever reason, I'm still on their email list, and this is kind of random, but kind of was whatever. They're hosting a press conference to have a special announcement Thursday, February 29th at 11 a.m. So keep an eye out for that. I put that on my Twitter. I don't know. It seems like they're trying to rile up something, so they might be cooking up something over there.
Okay.
Loudoun and Las Vegas have been 2 teams that we've kind of pointed to as teams that maybe should kind of, pull their own weight a bit more.
Step it up.
Yeah. Obviously, we want to win titles, but we want to have a competitive league that is sustainable, that has fans, that has good support in the process, right? What does it matter if you win like a NISA title right now if 7 of the 8 teams are like folding and there's not really anything going for them right now? You know what I mean?
Right.
The USL is obviously in a much different situation, but it's fantastic to see teams that kind of have been on the lower end of that for a bit, making something of themselves right now. And Las Vegas is certainly, looking. I'm not like they're not going to win the title or anything, but they're competitive. They have a reason to be excited. Fans can go to games and expect a win.
Exactly.
Like there's something going for them there. And then maybe, who knows, one day they keep building on that team and keep building on that fan base, and they can move out of that really ugly baseball stadium that they're in into something a bit more soccer specific. So I'm happy for them. It's big. It's good for the league overall. Like, obviously, having a bunch of bad teams, not good. Not that there are a bunch, but Las Vegas has certainly been one of the groups that's been holding us back a little bit, let's say. Okay. James, I threw this in there under USL news. I know we've been talking transfers. I just felt like it fits here more than in our extra time segment later on. So I'm just going to throw this in here because I'm sure you've seen this already. If you're listening to this podcast, there is a kind of like a new addition to the USL TV deal. Pretty cool stuff. Obviously, they had announced that partnership with CBS back in November, I think. But apparently, this is now a multi channel, multi-platform deal because they brought ESPN back in on this as well.
Very interesting.
And USL games are set to be featured in a quote record 35 national broadcast games in
Wow.
2024, which is really, really impressive for a league that has, just a few years ago, probably wouldn't have dreamed of having 35 nationally broadcast games on ESPN and CBS. We're talking, ESPN, ESPN2, CBS Sports. The USL final will be broadcast on CBS, like the main CBS channel. That's pretty cool. Like just your local CBS channel, you'll see the Rowdies, hopefully, right? In the final at the end of this season. CBS Sports Network will broadcast USL League One. And there's a bunch of little tidbits in here to look at, like, the USL League One, like in-season tournament cup thing that they're doing will be broadcast through ESPN Plus. So it's a little bit funky in like how they're separating things, but it makes sense if you take a look at it. And it's generally a good thing that the league is getting so much more broad exposure. Great stuff. This is good. I'm happy.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to highlight for us and highlight for the league overall.
Yeah, keep an eye on that. That's going to be pretty cool. I mean, you can watch a bunch of random USL games on national TV over the next season. The USL Championship and USL League One. That's important to note too. The League One teams are getting a lot of national airtime as well. Okay, let's jump into the Western Conference preview. We'll talk about some of these teams for a little bit here. Admittedly, I don't know a lot about these teams. I focus pretty heavily on the Eastern Conference just in terms of like what I see on my timeline. Like James said, I think I've kind of built up a natural East Coast bias. Before we jump into any of the Western Conference teams who we will be playing this year, if you recall, we're going to play every Western Conference team once, which is pretty cool, a new development this year. So we'll take a look at them. Before we do that, I'm going to throw in a shameless plug in here because I have to, because you can support this podcast. Like and subscribing is free, but if you need some new threads, you can support this podcast, RBLR Sports, by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com, checking out all the cool designs that have been cooked up over there. The link is in the description. Use promo code COYR for 10% off. Again, COYR for 10% off your purchase at shop.rblrsports.com. Bunch of cool shirts over there, not just for your Tampa Bay Rowdies, but designs based around Buccaneers, the Rays, the Lightning. Plenty of cool stuff to take a look at over there. Okay, James, I think it's about a good time to jump. Thank you, Eureka, on the magic producer over there. If you're watching this on YouTube, I was James Knowles for a second. That was pretty funny. Western Conference preview. Let's take a look at some of these teams that I'm going to put this all on you so that if you're wrong at the end of the year, nobody can say it was my fault. That James Knowles, not Carlos, have categorized as tier 2 teams in the Western Conference. We have 7 teams listed here, and we'll talk about them briefly individually. Let's just jump into that first one, James. Again, I'm going to put this out there. Just like last week, I don't think this is in any particular order, correct, James?
Yes, this is not in any order. I don't know how I went about doing the list that I did, but regardless of that, I considered all of these tier 2 within the Eastern or Western Conference. So we'll just categorize it that way.
Yeah. So all these teams, James Knowles, not Carlos, is saying that these will be the second half of the table, the bottom half of the table. But I think there's certainly some teams here that are better than the others. But I'm going to agree with you mostly from the broad knowledge I have of the Western Conference. I think this is a good tier 2 group. Okay, let's just jump into this first team, James. We'll talk about Oakland Roots. What do you know about this team, James? How has their offseason been? Is this team going to be anything of a threat to the Western Conference? Are we expecting a middle of the table finish here? Because it seems like that's where they've been the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that they're middle of the table right now. What I'm looking at with their roster is I see a pretty good defensive unit, pretty solid. What I really don't see from this roster, and maybe they're working on it, you'd hope they were for Oakland fans, obviously, but I don't see where goals are coming from at this point. So they have a couple of players that I wanted to highlight on the defensive side. Babukar Ng, who used to be with Phoenix Rising in the past. Niall Logue, who used to be with Hartford last year. Naveal Hackshaw is an interesting player. He was previously with Indy 11, but actually joined Oakland last year. So he's an interesting, defensive player. And then they also have two players that I really wanted to highlight. Camden Riley, a defensive midfielder who was previously with San Diego Loyal, probably one of the best players at San Diego Loyal in a lot of games. So that's interesting. Obviously, no one picked him up other than Oakland. I don't know exactly what that says, or if this was just the best deal for him. Maybe, he went to the University of the Pacific. Yeah, University of the Pacific. Good for me. So that is somewhere on the West Coast in California. Maybe this is close to home for him. I can't really say for sure. And then the last player is left back Justin Rasmussen, who's actually from Las Vegas, I'm finding out. But he was with Portland Timbers after he graduated from college, and he mostly played with their 2 team. You're going to see that a lot, obviously. So they do have a good defensive unit. I think Camden Riley will sit in front of Babukar NG, Niall Logue, and this player from Georgia, not the state, the country that is, Gagi Margalashvili. And if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. It made me think of goggles, but I'm not too sure. So Gagi Margalashvili will probably play at the back too. He's 6'4" and comes from the top division in Georgia. I don't know if that's a good league or not. I don't know if it's comparable. Again, I don't have access to Y-Scout like Oakland Roots hopefully does. Justin Rasmussen at left back and somebody at right back. And like I said, the only thing is I just don't know who's going to be scoring in this team. They have 2 strikers that don't really have a ton of goals between them in their history. So maybe it'll be a youth player. They do have a couple of those signed, but it's very hard to transition from the youth team, especially, a team like Oakland where they're maybe not as established as other ones, and start scoring in the USL Championship immediately. So if one of these guys has flown under the radar for me, then fair enough. But I kind of wonder where their goals are coming from.
Yeah, I'm looking at the USL again. Shout out USL Tactics. Shout out John Morrissey. Looking at his spreadsheet and kind of the lineup that he's predicting with his on his spreadsheet over here. And I full disclosure, I just do not recognize most of these names, especially the ones up top. I mean, some of the names in the back are kind of ringing some bells here, but like you said, I think I didn't notice it at first because I hadn't really looked too much into this team. I haven't really had much of a reason to pay attention to the Oakland Roots in particular. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm not really sure where their offense is going to come from. I'm not even particularly sure how strong their back line will be. And I mean, you can't really teach size, and this guy Gagi is 6'4", so it's a pretty big addition, quite literally. So keep an eye on them. I don't know. Interesting team, maybe, or not. I don't know. It's okay to be a boring team every once in a while and have a boring season. This could be one of those for Oakland. So
to be fair, as much as they might be boring on the field, they will. Well, I guess it's also on the field that they would not be. But all I'm trying to say is they have good jerseys. They have a very nice kit this year, and I will talk up their kit or not their kit sponsor, but their kit maker, Charlie. That is a very good company. They're based out of Mexico, but I really like what they did with it.
Yeah, I mean, they just have a cool brand. To be honest, I think that's some of the best branding in the USL. But what does it matter if you don't win games?
True.
Gotta start putting some things together, right? Anything else we want to mention on Oakland? Seems like I don't know. I'm sorry if you're an Oakland fan listening to this, but it seems like kind of a boring team. Like, it seems like you're gonna have a lot of, 1-0 games if your back line holds up. I don't know. Keep an eye on them.
All I can hope for is that they get their stadium stuff sorted out, and then they can move forward, hopefully, with the roster on the field. But I think that it is it's a work in progress, certainly.
That's true. I did forget about their stadium stuff. I'm sure that's probably looming, maybe particularly more than trying to put together a championship squad. Who knows? Maybe the offseason after that it's a bit stronger. So keep an eye on them next year, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Monterey Bay, James. Let's talk about these guys because there's a couple big signings, and I think one of them probably is the biggest is Tristan Traeger, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic player for Charleston. Right? He was at Charleston. Forward, scores a lot of goals. What else are we looking at here? Rafael Baca. You said that these 2 players, quote, won't be enough to carry this team. What do you mean by that, James?
Yeah, so I think that Tristan Traeger and Rafael Baca are clear in a way the best players on this team. I think that other than that, they have a couple of names that people will know. Simon Dawkins played in MLS. He's 36 now. Alex Dixon has gone all around the USL. He's 34 now. So honestly, I don't see the best defensive unit in this squad. I would say that I saw a better one at Oakland than here. There are a couple of players, obviously, who are they're not slouches or anything, but at the same time, I don't see anybody who's really standing out. So their two best players, in my opinion, are going to be Tristan Traeger and Rafael Baca. Again, Rafael Baca is a player who started his career with San Jose Earthquakes in MLS, moved to Cruz Azul in MLS. Anyone who doesn't know Cruz Azul, they are huge. They are a gigantic club, like not Club America, but they are the tier underneath that. Cruz Azul is gigantic. He made over 200 appearances for this club before he moved to Monterey Bay last season. So in the middle of last season, I should say. I think that he's going to be a very good player this year with a good preseason under his belt. I just don't know exactly, I don't know exactly what that'll mean for Monterey Bay because I don't see who he's supposed to be connecting with. There's Tristan Traeger. Obviously, he'll be playing. I don't know where he'll be playing because I don't know who they have up top that's better than him. Maybe Luther Archimed, who was with Sacramento Republic last year, but he also wasn't, a regular scorer for them. So I just don't see a lot, unfortunately, from Monterey Bay. This is another team where, I don't know what their fan base is like, in all honesty. I just remember them from games that were like grinding out as Tampa Bay Rowdies. As fans, I should say, we saw the players grind it out. But I hope that in the future they have a better products for the people who live in Monterey Bay who want to consume soccer so that they can come out. But I don't see it this year, and I don't see them doing too well. If there are Monterey Bay fans listening, if there are people who know better than me, I apologize, but that's what I'm looking at with this roster. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, this is a team that just doesn't really seem to pop out with a particularly strong group of players.
Yeah.
But Traeger is certainly a player that is fantastic. But yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you based on your analysis. That doesn't seem like he's gonna be enough to, I don't know, pull this team along with him. He certainly had a much better support system around him in Charleston on the field. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Doesn't seem like it'll be particularly successful. Sorry, but plenty of season to prove James and I wrong. Okay, moving on to El Paso, which is a team we kind of just talked about for a little bit. Off season has been kind of, they've made a lot of signings, but again, not particularly big splash signings or anything. We just mentioned Brandon Craig and Javier Navarez, who's joining this team on loan. I mentioned earlier that they signed Jamali Waite, who I would argue is maybe their biggest signing of the offseason.
Possibly, yeah.
You could maybe throw Joaquin Rivas in there as like a big signing, but I don't think Jamali. I think they're kind of different levels of signings there. I think Jamali has a lot, he proved himself as one of the best goalies in the league last year, I think. Joaquin Rivas, I just want to throw him in there as well because he's had a pretty good run in the USL across several teams. Scored 14 goals with Miami the past 2 seasons, 8 goals with Tulsa the year before that. So it's a guy that can score a decent amount of goals. When he does score, it seems like they're bangers for whatever reason. Like anytime you see a Joaquin Rivas highlight, it seems like they're like pretty impressive goals. Almost to the point where you think he's scoring much more than he is, because you see his highlights a bit more than you might see other players. I remember just a crazy shot against the Rowdies. I think it was in the playoffs when he was playing for Tulsa, or I could be making that up. He scored a goal against us in the playoffs. It was quite a banger. So he's a guy that can, turn some really impressive goals. 31, still has a lot left to give, but I don't think he's going to be a game changer for El Paso. From what I'm looking at, doesn't seem like this is the roster that will push them over the line, let's say, or get them particularly close either. I don't think it's a bad team by any means, but it doesn't seem like it's a roster that'll really get them to where they want to be.
I think that's a perfect summary of it. I think that they have a pretty good spine. That's what I said when we were talking about the players earlier. Brandon Craig and Tony Alfaro, most likely the 2 center backs. I would imagine Lucas Stauffer and maybe Miles Lyons as the 2 fullbacks on the left and the right, respectively. That probably is correct. Obviously, Jamali Waite and net. The 2 central midfielders, I would assume, are Javier Navarez, the player that they just signed on loan, and Bolu Akinyode, who is a very good defensive midfielder. I will absolutely talk him up in this league. But yeah, I just don't see, again, there isn't maybe, it's Well, actually, there is another left back I should highlight on there. Elijah Martin. He came from San Diego Loyal, so he's a good player. But up top, it's going to be difficult. I think Amando Moreno and Joaquin Rivas are players that have better records than I actually remembered, I will say. But at the same time, are they going to be able to lift this team? I think that comes down to, well, one of them could be this. I mean, Amano Moreno is frequently the guy who does the service. So if Joaquin Rivas can get on the end of that, then maybe I'm missing something here. But I don't see it in terms of this roster jumping out at me. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I do want to highlight one thing. Colombia and Puerto Rico are playing each other right now in the Gold Cup, and Puerto Rico has just tied it up again. So it's
Damn.
1-1 there. And if they hang on to this, then they will almost assuredly move on to the next round again in their first major tournament. So I'm just
against Colombia, who had a crazy World Cup run and has probably one of the best young talents in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not looking at the game. I don't know. I assume she's playing. But yeah, that's a crazy result if it holds. Okay. Anything else on this team, or should we jump ahead to our next team to look at?
Let's go to the next one.
Beautiful. Is a team that we also mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Because they're going to win the Western Conference because they signed my boy Stefan Stojanovic. No, I don't really know about that. Obviously, FC Tulsa. I think like they certainly have an attack, by the way. I think the offense is there. I don't know much about their back line or what they really have in store for the wing backs or the center backs. I really don't know anything about their back line, but I mean, obviously they have an incredibly talented forward in Philip Gooderoom, right? They're bringing in an incredibly underrated striker, I believe, in Stefan Stojanovic, and a pretty interesting prospect in Harvey St. Clair. Again, this 25-year-old attacking midfield winger from England, from Scotland, that played in the English youth system for Chelsea. Sorry, I'm bumbling my words. Hold on. Let's reset. Harvey St. Clair, the youth academy product of Chelsea. They also have a really, really experienced USL veteran in Justin Portillo coming in, Portillo. So keep an eye on him. I mean, they certainly have a pretty good mix of, I think, young and old. They might be relying on young a bit more than in the past seasons. But they certainly have a mix of veterans in here as well, like Justin Portillo. And I think that's a big, big signing for them to kind of hold on to a bit of veteran midfield in the center of the field. Yeah. So I think that's kind of an underrated big signing for them this offseason, but not any particularly large splash signings like we've seen some other teams do this year. They lost a few big players actually this offseason, like Marcus Epps. I think he's one of the biggest ones, and I really wanted to see him come to your Timbe Rowdies. Obviously, USF guy. Tommy McCabe was a great player for them as well. So, I mean, just a few big losses here for them. Justin Malou was a great fullback for them as well. I don't really know anything about the fullback that they brought in Arthur Rogers. Maybe you know a little bit about him. But overall, it seems like a pretty net neutral offseason. Maybe, I think that's where I'll go. I don't see them improving dramatically, but again, I think they do have a great attack between the players I mentioned. I don't know much about their back line though, so that could be maybe a weakness, or maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. So keep an eye on Tulsa.
Yeah, I would say based on what I'm looking at, the back line doesn't look to be the best. Their two goalkeepers that they've signed are Michael Creek, who comes from St. Louis City 2. We use Transfer Market or sometimes also Wikipedia, and I will just say Michael Creek does not have a Wikipedia page. So make of that what you will. The other player, Joey Roggeveen, I think, Roggeveen, if you're Dutch, he is from the Dutch second division, but also as a backup there. So I really don't know what to make of him. Again, I don't have Y-Scout. Maybe they saw something in him. He doesn't seem to have the best resume, let's say. In the back line, other than that, Arthur Rogers came from Northern Colorado Hailstorm. That is the league below the championship. Bradley Bourgeois has been with Tulsa for ages. Angel Bernal, probably a right back, is only 18. And Patrick Siegrist at left back will actually be a good player. I think that he has done well most of the places he's gone. I think in the center of the midfield, I also forgot to highlight Rashid Tete as one of the center backs. He's a good player. But in the center of the midfield, Blaine Ferry, Lucas Owinski, and Nate Worth are probably going to be the guys who are, participating alongside Justin Portillo that you mentioned already. Nate Worth is somebody worth highlighting because he is 16 and looks to be one of the best players in that age bracket. He came from the New York Red Bulls youth team and he wanted to play immediately. Tulsa said that they would give him minutes and he moved there. So, good for him in that sense. And I like the boldness, but, as much as he will be a contributing player, I don't know how much he's going to contribute to Tulsa winning games. He's going to get what he needs to learn as a 16-year-old, getting playing time, getting minutes. That turning into 3 points is something else entirely. So I just don't see, I'm not sure entirely how this team is going to get the ball up to what you have highlighted is probably a pretty good attacking unit with Moses Dyer, Philip Goodrum, and Stefan Stojanovic up top. And so that's my take on it anyway.
So I was just looking for my keys. I was like, where do I put them? Whatever. Okay, moving on. Memphis is a team that's interesting to see in this second tier because they're always a team that, like you said in your notes here, is painful to play against. They always manage to pull off some good games against us. Brought in a couple big names, I think. Well, big-ish names. Neko Brett, I think, being the biggest of them.
Yeah.
Incredibly talented forward at the USL level that's made quite a name for himself. If you've been around the USL for a little bit, you'll know who he is. Neko Brett. One of their biggest losses, their biggest loss was losing Aaron Malloy in the central midfield. Bruce Buckmaster was a fine fullback for them as well. But they brought in a pretty decent fullback in his own right, and Oscar Jimenez that I think will replace him quite well. They still have great talent in Leston Paul in their central midfield, so not necessarily a replacement for Aaron Malloy, but someone that was already there. Zach Duncan is a central midfielder that they brought in. I don't know too much about him. Correct me James, maybe you can add a bit more context, but doesn't seem like they brought in kind of a clear replacement for losing a big name like Aaron Malloy, although admittedly that's quite hard to do. That's a huge talent they've lost. So they do have other talent as well in the attacking midfield, like Bruno Lapa. So they have talent. I mean, they lost a good chunk of it, maybe some of their biggest talent in Aaron Malloy. But they brought in a few good names and one particularly great name in Neko Brett. I'm curious to see how it plays out on the field. I think they have a good enough team to compete for, like, I don't know, certainly playoffs, like middle of the table, certainly like probably lower end of the playoffs. But I think they could get there with the players they have. It won't be pretty, but I think they'll do it.
Yeah, I don't see a ton of improvement here. I do want to highlight a couple of names that you already said. Zach Duncan, he is Australian, but he actually comes from the Danish First Division and then on loan to the A-League. Now, the A-League is not as good as MLS, but the fact that he was in the Danish First Division is very interesting to me. I'm not entirely sure what to make of him. I don't have any video footage, as I keep saying, but he will be something. He will be somebody to keep an eye on. Neko Brett, obviously, very good player, scored, a good amount of goals last year for Birmingham Legion, but he is still getting older. So, eventually the tires will come off of that. I don't know if that's this year. I would probably doubt it. I would say that he definitely has one or two more good years at the very least. But, the pieces around him, I'm not too sure about. The one player that I did want to say, you mentioned, them losing Aaron Malloy. I think if they have kept Samuel Carriaga on loan from Lanús in Argentina, that will be their new starting defensive midfielder, more than likely. I don't know if he's good enough to replace Aaron Malloy, but he is on loan from a top division team in Argentina. So that is something to keep in mind. He looked good a couple of little times that I saw him. I think with a full preseason under his belt, obviously that'll be helpful. I think, though, this team is missing pieces unless they go out and sign a couple more guys before the season starts that will actually get them over the line in terms of playoffs and everything. So their Brazilian unit is pretty good, but I don't know if it's the best Brazilian unit in the league, let's say.
For sure. Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I'm curious to see what they've got once they hit the field. It seems like, again, based on what I'm looking at, I don't know too much about a lot of these players, but the players that pop out seem like they could certainly pull them along to a playoff appearance, even if it is kind of on that lower end. Memphis now a Western Conference team, so kind of sad we don't get to play them twice, but not really because they were kind of annoying. Okay, moving on into our last two here, second to last, we're going to talk about none other than New Mexico United, the black and yellow squad. Great branding as well. I love how they kind of like put everything out, their jerseys. All their branding is really great. And they signed, as you might remember, former Rowdy Deon Harris. I don't know if that's the biggest signing of the offseason for them. Probably not. But a fantastic winger, obviously, in Deon Harris. I don't know a lot of these other names, to be honest. I mean, they have Greg Hurst at forward still. Santi Moir is still staying there. It's a fantastic central midfielder and attacking midfielder that you might remember from that really, really good Phoenix run the last 3 or 4 years. James, what do you think about this squad? Because I'm looking at the players, none particularly jumping out as big signings for me here, but I could just be missing something. It seems like it could be a decent enough squad, but we have them here in the tier 2 group for a reason.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of players whose names we'll know because they've been around USL. They've been around a lot of our rival teams, in fact, but there are just a lot of guys that I don't think are ready to make a team a playoff contender in this club. So that's kind of the problem that I see here. There are, some other guys to highlight. I guess that I think the biggest one probably is going to be Abu Danladi. Abu Danladi is originally from Ghana. He went to UCLA after coming to the U.S. from the Right to Dream Academy, which is part of the ownership group of the new MLS San Diego team. They're the only part of the ownership group that I do not actively dislike. But he did well at UCLA and got an early contract to go to MLS. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him there because of injuries. And somehow his last team was in Albania before he came to New Mexico. So he could... I hate to phrase it this way, but he could be a dud of a signing. Or the other thing is he might be actually like a really good signing. He's a very good player. He's a good player deep down somewhere. It's just turning that into product on the field. And I don't know if he has that at this point in him, 28 years old. I can't say. The only other player that I would highlight is Marco Micheletto. He is from Italy, if you could not tell from the name. He went to Akron for his final year, and then he played in the USL League One. So that is, again, the league below us. Played for Columbus Crew 2 for 2 seasons, and that doesn't sound great, but he was one of the best players in the MLS Next Pro. I almost forgot what it was. So yeah, he jumped up a league and a level, and he could be another good player, or he might not ultimately be that great. I think that they have a lot of good pieces to put something together, but there's not a lot of star power. I will say that there's not a lot of star power. It's going to have to be a very well organized, a very probably defensive team. And they could get a lot of success, or they could probably end up finding it relatively hard to score based on what I'm looking at. So that's why I put them in the second tier.
Yeah, agreed. That makes sense. Okay. Last team here. We've talked about them quite a bit this offseason, it feels, because there's stuff to talk about for them. They deserve it. It feels like something positive is coming out of Las Vegas, Nevada for the USL for the first time in a little bit. I think you kind of noted it well here. The big question is, how far could this ownership group take them in one season? Don't hold your breath. I don't think this is going to be a championship team by any means.
Las Vegas Lights not in the championship, Carlos. My goodness.
Yeah, it's not a hot take. I know. I'm sorry, and I'm not producing anything new on this episode of the podcast. But it's a team, and that's more than we've been able to say for a long time for this club. I mean, it's a real team with real players you might recognize. Obviously, Solomon Asante probably being the biggest one out there in the attack on the wing. He's got so much left to give. What's this guy's first name? Who am I looking at? Emra Clementa is a pretty solid center back. Spent the last 3 seasons with Oakland Roots. Appeared in 81 games for them, so he was a consistent starter. 4 goals for them. Other big center back signing is Fabian Garcia, who spent the last 2 seasons with San Antonio FC, 58 appearances in those 2 seasons. Again, another solid starter, regular, consistent starter. Scored 3 goals with them as well. So I've heard a bit of talk about their center backs on Twitter, because I see the fan bases of the former teams being like, oh man, like it's so sad to see them go. And then wait, what the hell? Las Vegas signed them. Like what? Like I didn't even know they were still so it's interesting to see what they've got going on there. They're signing real players. I don't know much about some of their other attacking players like Ricky Alba or Pinzone. You highlighted Ascona already, but it could be a real. I mean, it is a real team. Like there's players on the field that can actually play game of soccer and be maybe somewhat competitive. I'm not really particularly expecting playoffs either, but they could be on the bubble. I have to use NCAA basketball terms. I keep hearing the word on the bubble now with March Madness coming up, on the bubble, on the bubble. So this could be a team that I think might be around the bubble, let's say.
Yeah. I will also highlight, we talked about this before, but their new owner, Jose Bautista, former baseball player, he is from the Dominican Republic. He signed Edison Ascona that I talked about. The other player that you just highlighted there, Carlos, Ricky Alba. He was born in Norway, but he plays for the Dominican Republic. So I don't know if this is going to be Dominican Republic West. I would personally love that. I think that there are at least a couple of youth players that they should sign. Angel Montes de Oca for one, and maybe Izzy Boatwright on loan also from Miami. But I am not in charge of that. If they want to go and sign all of the Dominican Republic national team, honestly, I'd be happy with it. But I would doubt that is how it goes. So it'll be interesting to see how Las Vegas turns out the rest of their offseason, because that's only 3 more weeks.
Yeah. Keep an eye on that. I mean, but they signed players. Well, that's a sign of life, and that's great.
Yeah.
I found my keys, by the way, if anybody was interested. Okay. That sums up that first group of Western Conference teams. We'll obviously talk about the top tier, I guess tier 1 of the Western Conference on this next episode next week. So keep an eye out for that. We'll jump into extra time here. Not a ton of news, but the Rowdies did play another preseason game. They won 4-0. Woohoo. I mean, we played against USF, so it was a college team. That being said, it was great to score that many goals. Rivera got on the score sheet, and so did Fernandez. Leo Fernandez, obviously, his first goal since that big injury that took him out of the preseason last year. His first goal in like 8 games. Even though it's a preseason game, it's a game, so that's pretty cool to see. He was really excited about that. In the press release they sent out after that, or in the article of the recap they had on the Rowdies website. In addition to him and Rivera scoring, Crisostomo scored a goal in the 31st minute, who seems to be kind of in great form, by the way. Like he got to preseason workouts and training pretty late because he had a child, I believe. So, I mean, that's a pretty good reason to be late if you're going to be late.
Yeah.
But yeah, so congrats to him, and then congrats for getting into form so quickly. It seems to be one of the topics of the offseason. Something that the Rowdies article highlighted a bit after that preseason game. Seems like he's already gotten to the swing of things, so that's great. And the 4th goal was scored by a Rowdies trialist in the 64th minute. So still a couple trialists out there playing games for this squad. Could be the case that we see maybe 1 or 2 more of them get signed as offseason comes to a close here. Can never really have too much depth, James.
Nope, I agree with that. I think that unfortunately a lack of depth has come back to haunt us more than once. So I would definitely like to see us fill out the roster as best we can, and as much as we can avoid sacrificing on quality. Let's do that too. But yeah, I agree that it's still good news.
Yep. Okay. That's actually it for extra time, by the way. I think we threw some of the things that we would throw in extra time at the beginning. So I don't know. I guess it was like pregame time. And actually, I don't know, whatever. Name's still in progress. James, do you have an update on the Puerto Rico Colombia score before we log out here?
Unfortunately, I guess that goal was overturned. So it is actually 1-0. But they're still in this game. They're still in this game.
All right. Well, if by the time you're listening to this, that game will be over. Obviously, keep an eye out for that run because I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure, but it seems like they're pretty good form. So maybe they can make something happen in this game, and who knows? Hopefully in future games as well.
Hopefully.
Shout out the Puerto Rico Women's team. Shout out Madison Cox, and tune in to our RBLR Deportes show as well as our Tampa Bay Sun program. There's finally news coming out from that awesome team with again another team with great branding, and a cool stadium situation they're figuring out on the water in downtown Tampa. That's gonna be awesome. Thank you all for listening. Follow at RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, anywhere social media exists. RBLR Sports is probably there. Not probably. RBLR Sports is there. Use hashtag AskRBLR as always to throw in any questions, send us things to talk about. You Follow me at Carlos TPA10. I'm just complaining about Georgetown basketball and getting excited for Copa America this summer. Ecuador is going to have a great run. I feel it this year, James. What's going on your social media? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I am also mostly on Twitter, and my handle is at RBLR James K. Hopefully that is easy enough. I was trying to make it go along with the podcast here. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate when you do. As you said, like and subscribe to us on all of the different social medias, but also on our podcast, wherever you get podcasts, we are too. And you can get the full experience on YouTube. If you don't want to do that, we are on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, everywhere you are. We are too.
Yep. Who wouldn't want to see our faces though, James? I mean, come to YouTube. I've been I got a new haircut. I guess you can't see it though because I'm wearing my hat. I always wear the Rowdies hat when I'm recording.
You can see me trying to remember which side I have to point to get to
exactly.
to get to the ad every night.
Exactly. We're everywhere you'll find our podcast. Give us a listen, like and subscribe as always. And for another week of preseason news, and we're almost there. Come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.